All right, welcome everybody to our bi-weekly Thursday webinar. We're so excited you are joining us today. As always, I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Adina Glincher, and I am the Senior HR Services Advisor here at PayEntry. And I am not an attorney, so I do need to tell you that this training does not constitute legal advice. If you have any questions for your legal team, we ask that you reach out to them directly with those questions. However, any questions that you might have about the content of the training, please do not hesitate to reach out to our team here at PayEntry. You can email us at hrservices@payentry.com. And you can always put your questions into the question box, and if time permits, we'll do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. All right, now that we got that out of the way, why are we here today? Today we're going to be talking about common HR mishaps. And you'll see from the agenda on the screen, we're going to be covering employee handbooks, lack of documentation, mismanaging employee files and records, non-existent training, misclassification of employees, incomplete job descriptions, other mishaps, and then we will end with a Q&A. All right, so wouldn't it be great if you can anticipate and avoid your next HR disaster? I don't know about you all, but many of you on this call are managers or business owners, so I would assume you would say yes to that question. Outdated policies, inadequate documentation, slip-ups in hiring, firing, employee paperwork, and other areas of HR can make a company extremely vulnerable to numerous liabilities. And most HR mishaps are preventable when you take a proactive approach, which of course our team here at PayEntry can help you with. So we're going to start with a poll. We want to know, when was the last time you updated your employee handbook? So give me one moment to go ahead and start this. Alrighty, you should see it on your screen. Go ahead and select the one that applies. Did you update it in the beginning of 2022? Have you never updated it? Have you recently updated it? Do you have no idea or don't remember? Or do you not have an employee handbook? All right, we're getting a lot of participation. Thank you. And I see a good variety of answers. So I am glad you are all here today. I'm going to give you just a few more seconds. Oh, we're almost at 100%. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that. And let's look at your answers. So it looks like most of you recently updated it, so wonderful job. Some of you don't have a handbook, so we're definitely going to talk about why it's important to have one. Some of you don't remember, which is fair. You have a lot going on as a business owner, so we're going to touch on why it's important to have one and update it. Some of you have never updated it, so you might be one of those businesses that have one, but maybe it's dated 2012 or something earlier. And then some of you updated it at the beginning of 2022, which is wonderful, but guess what? We are approaching 2023, so it is time to update again. All right, thank you for your participation. So what is the purpose of an employee handbook? Some of you have been to our handbook webinars and have probably heard this, but we're going to briefly touch on it. In a nutshell, it sets clear expectations for your employees. Provides them with a detailed overview of policies, key procedures, and guidelines. An employee handbook can help protect your business. What do we mean by that? So when you have an employee handbook, not only are you clearly setting expectations and policies and being transparent with your employees, as bullet number 2 shows you, but you're also allowing for consistency within your business. And from an HR standpoint, consistency is key. If you give one employee 3 days of sick leave and another employee 5 days of sick leave even, you are opening yourself up to a liability, as that could potentially be looked at as favoritism, discrimination, or a wide variety of things. So it's important that you are being consistent across the board. It also ensures compliance with federal and state laws. Many of you likely operate in states, well, all of you operate in states that have their own laws, and many of those states have an increased amount of HR laws than they used to have. So it is important that you are not only having a federal handbook, but also a state addendum, or maybe multiple state addendums if you are in multiple states. Lastly, it's an opportunity for you to introduce your company's culture, mission, and values to your new hires and to your employees, as that may often be changing. All right. What are some common handbook mistakes? So those of you who have a handbook, or maybe you don't have one, it's something to consider when you have a handbook. It is important to consider what you're doing with it, who's creating it, what kind of template you're using. So using a handbook template can be a really great thing, but it's important to remember that your company is unique and your handbook should be unique as well. So it should be unique to your organization, have your organization's policies and your actual practices. So what do we mean by that? You can write the most beautiful and helpful handbook out there, but if you are not abiding by it, it is worse to have one in place. So make sure that your handbook is updated as your policies and practices are being updated. Which leads me to my next point, out-of-date employee handbooks. Laws change, we all know it, and new situations arise. So it is important to include those laws and new situations in your handbook by updating your policies. Omitting disclaimers. So there should be something in your handbook that says something along the lines of nothing in this handbook should create a contract of employment, nor should it alter the at-will relationship, assuming you're in an at-will state. And you should also have a disclaimer that says that the handbook cannot address every situation. That may be common sense to you and I, but an employee may think you just don't have a policy in place if it's not in the handbook. Not making your handbook user-friendly is also a common mistake. And when we say user-friendly, we really mean reader-friendly. Your employees are likely not legal professionals, and so we don't want to have legal jargon in our handbooks. We want to make sure that anyone can understand what the verbiage is saying, and that is written for the reader. And then failing to train. So don't assume that just because you have a handbook, your management is going to necessarily read it and implement it. So make sure you are training your managers in accordance with the policies in the handbook and that you have consistency across the board. All right. If you have worked with an HR professional before, the one thing you've probably heard all of us say is, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. And why do we say that? Document, document, document. It is crucial for reducing legal risk. If you use the wrong language or focus on the wrong things or neglect important details, it's going to do you more harm than good in your documentation. I can't tell you how many times we get calls from clients saying that they have an employee who's not performing well and they want to move forward with termination. The number one thing we're going to start with is, great, have you told the employee they're not performing well? And the answer is usually, of course, we've told them it's not working out, but there's no documentation in place to show that that conversation has occurred. So if you decide to terminate that employee, it's going to be your word against theirs. And in many states, the employee is going to win. So it's important that you're documenting those conversations as proof that they did happen, often also known as progressive discipline. So failing to stick to the facts is a common error that occurs in documentation. It's important to leave out assumptions, judgments, or other opinions. Details should be included, such as dates, times, quotes, witnesses, and records that can help your organization in potential legal cases. Failing to show empathy or authenticity is definitely a common mistake. Make sure you're using a neutral tone and avoid negative or arrogant language. Describe incidents clearly in a language the employee understands and avoid jargon or overly formal language. Focus on the problematic behavior instead of detailing every minor infraction. And this happens a lot. Generally, when it's time to start documenting an employee's performance, we are extremely frustrated. And so it's easy to put down everything they've ever done wrong in that write-up. Instead, make sure you are being clear and concise in your documentation and you are focusing on the problematic behavior that has led to this occurrence. And then include a path for improvement that the employer will provide to help the employee. So the whole point of progressive discipline is to coach your employees and to hopefully get them to improve their performance or whatever violation may have occurred. And then failing to focus on workplace policies is definitely a mistake. So behavioral expectations should be spelled out clearly in employee manuals and policies. And managers using legal terms such as harassment can often be used inappropriate. So it's important that you have somebody, a second set of eyes looking at this documentation, whether that's HR, a legal partner, or maybe an HR advisor or professional. So we have some examples on the screen of language to avoid, and then what you can say instead to get the same point across. So the first one is employee X was inconsiderate during the meeting. Well, that's unfortunate. We don't want our employee to be inconsiderate, but what does inconsiderate mean to you versus what it means to me? Instead, you can say employee X loudly interrupted employee Y at least 3 times during our sales meeting on October 1st. In that second sentence, we provided a lot more detail and we stated what inconsiderate meant. The second example, because employee Z has been out of the office so many times, she has been missing assignment deadlines a lot. That's definitely an issue, but that doesn't tell us a lot of detail. Instead, you can say employee Z has missed 3 of the project deadlines we outlined as a team in our meeting on October 10th. The next example, being late is rude and shows that employee B is not reliable. Instead, you can say employee B has been more than 20 minutes late for his shift on the following dates this month. So it's important to include dates and times in as many details as possible. And then the last one, we see this one a lot. Your conduct was sexual harassment. Well, what did they do? That doesn't tell us a lot. Instead, you can say you massaging employee A's shoulders on 2 occasions was inappropriate and violated our sexual harassment policy. So you can see how both the left and the right side of the screen, it's communicating the same general message, but you're providing a lot more detail with sticking to the facts. All right, we want to know one more thing from all of you. So we're going to go ahead and launch our second poll. Which statement best applies to your record keeping practices? Let me go ahead and launch this. And if none of them apply to you, that's okay. You can always message in your answer to me instead, or just hang tight and wait for the results. So, do you have one personnel file for each employee? Do you only keep documents that look important? Do you keep organized records based on state and federal requirements? Maybe you don't keep any personnel files, or maybe you keep everything forever because that's just easier than keeping track of the record retention requirements. Awesome, and I'm seeing a lot of participation. I really appreciate it. It definitely helps us understand kind of who our audience is and how we can best tailor our webinars. All right, we're going to give it a few more seconds. We almost have everyone participating again. All righty. Ooh, I got a good message, and I'm gonna read it out loud to everybody. And I think the person who just messaged me knows that this was a little bit of a trick. So I am going to share the results with you. All right, so many of you have one personnel file for each employee, which is great. That is generally what we see employers have. It shows that you have a dedicated personnel file and you're keeping records, which is amazing. Maybe you keep organized records based on federal and state requirements, even better. That means you're aware that there are certain record retention requirements and you are keeping them for the required length of time. Some people only keep documents that look important. I think that's a great start, but it's important to know about the record retention requirements in your state. And some people keep everything forever, which we hear very often as well, because we're always afraid to throw things away because we never want that to kind of bite us in the butt. And then I got a message from somebody that says, I keep a personnel file and a medical file for each employee, but that wasn't an option on your screen. So that is a great answer, and actually the answer we were kind of looking for, which aligns very well with the C. I keep organized records based on state and federal requirements. So although you may have been told, hey, make sure you have a personnel file for each employee, that is correct, but you should actually have more than one. So best practice is that you have 3. And I know that sounds insane, but let me tell you a little bit about why. First and foremost, a personnel file is crucial. Every employee should have their emergency contact, their general information, maybe most of their employer documents go into the personnel file, or their employee documents, excuse me. A medical file should be kept separate, so wonderful job on that one. And the reason being is, one, there's different record retention requirements. Medical information does need to be kept longer than most personnel file information. And two, if that file is ever subpoenaed, we don't want to send medical information necessarily to the state or whoever subpoenaed it. So medical information should be kept separate. And the third file is often a confidential file. Now, depending on your organization, you may be able to get away with 2 files, but anything with a social security number should be kept in that confidential file. And as part of our pay entry HR services, we can provide you with state-specific record retention requirements, go over what should be in each of these files, and even send you a checklist and help you do an audit. So I know we're giving you a lot of information, but you are not alone. We are here to support you. All right, so mismanaging employee personnel files. It is important to know what information should be documented and how to best handle those records. Common mistakes include having a catch-all personnel file, not limiting access to employee records, so just letting anyone see them, maintaining health records in your personnel file, so that's what we just talked about, not being aware of record retention obligations, disclosing personnel files without the proper consent, not keeping employee personnel files at all, or keeping them forever because we're afraid to throw them away. All right, the next mishap we're going to talk about is lack of training in the workplace. So how important is training? The answer is critical. Employees value training opportunities, and ongoing learning and growth often lead to a successful career. Yet many employers often fail to provide their employees with the proper tools for development. Trainings may include management trainings, leadership, compliance, onboarding, technical, maybe harassment prevention, depending on your state, diversity, equity, inclusion, health, safety, and more. By ignoring the importance of workplace training, you can risk unhappy employees and high turnover, low rates of production, an unsafe workplace, ineffective management, an increase in business expenses, loss of customers, and of course, a greater liability. Oh, and I just want to pause for one moment before we go through this slide. As always, there is a copy of this presentation in the handout section, so feel free to download that and either follow along as we continue going through, or just using that for your reference after the presentation. So here are some fun statistics for all of you. Nearly 59% of employees claim they had no workplace training and that most of their skills were self-taught. 70% of employees would be somewhat likely to leave their current job to work for an organization known for investing in employee development and learning. And this one I think is just absolutely mind-blowing. 94% of employees agree to stay longer at a company if it invests in their training. We often hear, how do I get my employees to stay? How do I keep them happy? I can't keep paying them more and more. There are other options. Consider, are you training them? Are you providing them opportunities to grow and develop? A frequently trained employee contributes to 21% more profit than an employee who's infrequently trained. So if you accept that a better trained workforce is likely to be more profitable than one where employee training is lacking, then you would think it would make sense to be a business that invests in training. And as part of our service, we have a learning management system with hundreds of e-learnings available to you and your employees. So if you decide to, if you want to reach out and learn more about our different packages, then that is included in all levels, all packages we offer. The next mishap we want to talk about is employee classifications. And our last webinar a couple weeks ago, we really dug into this. So definitely check that out at payentry.com/webinars if you want to take a look at this in further detail. Appropriately classifying employees helps ensure all requirements are maintained and helps prevent discrimination in terms of benefit eligibility, compensation, and overall treatment. Employees are generally classified based on their number of hours scheduled to work, their expected duration of the job, their job duties, and their salary threshold. And there are different types of classifications in employees, including regular full-time, regular part-time, exempt and non-exempt, classifications under the FLSA, exemptions including interns, learners, volunteers, etc., independent contractors, temporary or seasonal employees. And as mentioned, you can visit our website, payentry.com/webinars, to view our most recent webinar called Employee Classifications for additional information. All right, now we're gonna do a few true and false questions, and we're not gonna do a poll for these, so you're welcome to go ahead and message in your answers into the questions box, or just follow along in your head, that works too. See where you rank. All right. True or false, all employees paid by salary are exempt from overtime. All right, it looks unanimous. False, correct. Just because an employee is paid salary does not mean you don't have to pay them overtime. Next, state law applies when state law is more generous to employees. Is that true or false? All right. True. Oh, I just saw false come in. So oftentimes people think federal law trumps state law, but that's not necessarily the case. Whichever is more in favor of the employee is going to be the one that you need to follow. Next, if a worker's contract states they are an independent contractor, it protects the business from misclassification. All right, I am seeing a mixture here too. That is actually false. Just because you say in writing somebody is an independent contractor, that does not make them an independent contractor. You do have to prove this through a few tests, and they do have to meet the qualifications, of course. And then lastly, misclassifying employees causes an increase in liability. All right, I'm hoping to see all the same answer come in here. Yes, you are all correct. That is true. Great, thank you for your participation. So what are some consequences of employee misclassification? Well, you may have wage, tax, and employment violations, which result in fines and back pay. Tax and payroll fines, maybe owing back state and federal taxes, Social Security, Medicare taxes, and state unemployment. Penalties for failing to deposit payroll taxes, fines for not having your I-9, legal and punitive damages and ongoing lawsuits may occur, and then back payments to reclassified employees, including unpaid overtime, wages, benefit expenses, vacation, missed meal breaks and rest periods, and of course, reputation damage, which none of us want. All right, next we're going to talk about the benefits of a job description. So job descriptions help promote proper classification. A job title is not the determining factor. Not the determining factor. Job duties and responsibilities are. So it doesn't matter what you call the job. It really matters what the job duties are. Support compensation structures. So job descriptions clarify which jobs are similar and entitled to similar pay, and which jobs merit different pay based on the required levels of skills, knowledge, or responsibility. They help prevent discrimination by defining a job's requirements, clear standards, and the job description may also help justify your employment decision. This is a big one, ADA compliance. By accurately listing essential duties and responsibilities, you will be able to respond efficiently to an accommodation request and comply with ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then complying with OSHA, including information about working conditions such as dangerous work environments and special equipment used, can help ensure compliance with safety rules and alert an applicant that the position is hazardous. Do's and don'ts of writing a job description. So make sure that you do define both job duties and the ideal candidate for the job if you're using it as a job posting. Describe the role itself. For example, somebody who has strong communication skills versus somebody who is prepared to put together press conferences for important events. Include company information, including your diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, core values, mission statement, company perks and benefits, and of course, ensure compliance with federal and state laws. Here are some things you shouldn't do. Don't get overly creative with job titles. Stick with the standard job titles that are search friendly. Oftentimes people do things or call jobs something such as a numbers guru instead of an accountant. Well, not only is it going to be difficult to find an accountant that way, because they're likely looking for accounting jobs, but it also can lead to confusion in what the job really entails. Don't use company jargon outsiders won't understand. Make sure you include, don't include unrealistic expectations or nice to have skills, and don't include gender specific or aggressive language. All right, and lastly, some other mishaps that we didn't get to dig into too much today, but we did want to make sure you were all aware of. Being too friendly. I know that one sounds a little funny. We all think we can't be too friendly, right? But confusing culture for friendships and personal affairs that don't allow the business and staff to thrive is a big mistake. We want people to like us, and we all do, but it's important not to cross that line. Sharing confidential information is definitely an issue. Not understanding the need to know basis. So not everyone needs to know everything. Using information to advance your career and oversharing with other team members can be an issue. Forgetting the human in human resources. Not understanding your employees and treating them like numbers on a spreadsheet. Take time to focus on your employees. Learn what their wants are, what their goals are. Focus on training, development, engagement, and retention. One size does not fit all. So there is no black and white answer to everything. In fact, in HR and in just business, there is a lot of gray area in the workplace. Having a know-it-all attitude is never good. So being afraid to say, I don't know, let me get back to you. That's not a good thing. We all can't know everything. So don't be afraid to admit that. It's better to research than to give advice that could put the company in a position of liability. And then make sure that you understand the importance of compliance. Don't underestimate it. Not knowing what you don't know won't hurt you. That's false. It will. Conduct regular HR audits to protect you and your business and ensure you are up to date, compliant, and you're following best practices. So how can our team help you with all of the things we discussed today? Well, first and foremost, our HR professionals can help you update or create employee handbooks and company policies. We can actually do a compliance audit with you. So whether or not you are a current HR services client, this is an a la carte service we offer where we can run a few questions by you, ask for a few documents, and really determine whether or not our services are something you would benefit from. Keep up with changing state and federal laws, and assist you with day-to-day HR best practices, forms, and policies. And then as mentioned earlier, our HR services compliance packages also include a learning management system with a broad array of employee and manager trainings, including state compliant harassment prevention training. All right, I'm gonna open it up to questions. Go ahead and submit your questions if you have any. Give me one moment to see if we have any submitted. All right, I don't see any coming in. So we're gonna go ahead and end there. In 2 weeks, we have another we do see one. How long should we keep an I-9 form when the employee is no longer working? Oh, that's a great question. So the federal guidance on I-9s is that you should keep it either from 1 year post-termination or 3 years post-start date. So 3 years after the day they started or 1 year after the day they were terminated, whichever is later. Great question. All right. So we're going to go ahead and end there. If you have any questions that you didn't get the chance to ask, or after reviewing the slides, if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. The email is on the screen at hrservices@payentry.com. And we appreciate you coming to our webinar today, and join us again in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody. Bye.